get started. If you're looking for optimizing intake, leveraging tech tools to hone your intake process, you are in the right spot. Thank you all for hanging with us. We know 3:30 panel on day 2. I think my math is that we're somewhere 15 or 16 hours into panels at this point. So your reward for coming is we do have some candy on the tables. We've got some more candy up here if anybody needs some more. So you get a little bit of sugar energy. So my name is Laura Bly. I'm going to be moderating our panel today with our lovely panelists that I'll let introduce themselves in just a moment. We are going to be talking about creating effective and efficient intake processes. So as we were kind of brainstorming around this panel, the question we were kind of kept coming back to was, how do you create an efficient process that makes the best use of technology that ensures that priority cases are getting into the right hands and getting in quickly, and non-priority applicants are given actionable self-help advice? And we have to do all of this with very limited staff resources, of course. So we have 3 organizations here today that are going to talk about or help you understand how you can identify areas of intake that could be made more efficient using various tech tools, understand how technology is being used by various legal services programs in the intake process, and identify tech tools that may create efficiencies in your own process. So we'll have a couple of different organizations talking about kind of what they're using day to day. We also are going to want to hear from you all about what you're using, what's working well for you, what technology is helping you create a streamlined and efficient intake process. So I'm going to go ahead and let folks go ahead and introduce themselves. So Sally, we'll start with you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Let us know if you want us to throw candy at you, because we do have chocolate up here that I can, use my old softball skills. Okay, here I gotta take my, okay. I mean, it's so close. So it was like right, I was like, I'm gonna hit someone, and I didn't hit anybody, so I feel like that's a win. My name is Sally Chaffin. I'm with Atlanta Legal Aid, and I'm the Practice Innovation Manager.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Nick Whitaker. I'm with Lone Star Legal Aid, and I'm the Directing Attorney of Case Management.
Is this working?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I am Leslie Dodson. I am the Managing Attorney of the Intake Unit at Virginia Legal Aid Society.
Okay, thank you all. And as I mentioned, my name is Laura Bly. I'm a consultant that specializes in working with organizations to optimize their legal server case management system. So I work with LSC and non-LSC organizations on legal server onboarding, special projects, TIGs, things like that. So the 3 approaches we're going to talk about today are going to be from Virginia Legal Aid Society, who's using an automated phone screening, phone queue, and Scripps and Kemp's case management system. Lone Star Legal Aid is creating intake processes that operates off of case statuses and reports in Legal Server. And Atlanta Legal Aid is using guided navigation, appointment setting, and pre-screen processes in Legal Server. So as we were preparing for this, we had a couple of guiding questions that I just want to give you all up front so that we kind of could norm together as to what we're going to talk about. So we asked everybody to think about what their current approach to intake is, with a focus in particular on the tech tools that they're using. And how did you get here? So what was the process you started with? What are pain points that led you to make any changes? How has your approach to intake been refined over time? And how have those tech tools changed as your approach has changed? Oh, thank you. We also want to know, how are you evaluating your processes and tools, and what are you still looking to change? So that's what's going to guide us throughout the session today. And we're going to start with Leslie.
Okay. Just to give a little background, despite our name, Virginia Legal Aid Society, we do not cover the entire state. We serve 20 counties and 6 cities. The intake unit is myself, a supervising attorney, and 7 paralegals who do the real hard work by answering the phones all day and entering the intakes. They may be watching the live stream, so I thought I better throw that in there. Our intake is done primarily by phone. We do have some outreach clinics, and of course we make exceptions when needed, but primarily all of our intakes are done over the phone through the intake unit. On our website, there is a link to do an online intake. Technically, it's really just more like online triage, and I'll discuss a little bit more about that, how we arrived where we are today. But at this point, it really just asks a little bit about your location and what your legal issue is. And clients that access us through the website are instructed to give us a call, and they're given a phone code which gives them priority when they call in, that they're bumped to the front of the line. Like I said, most of our intake is done by phone. We use Ring Central Engage as our current provider for our phone services. And when clients call in, unless they have a phone code and go through the priority queue, they're all asked initial questions right when they call in before they reach our intake line at all. They're asked about their location and the legal issue. For instance, if you say you have a criminal issue, it routes you somewhere, it gives you legal information at that point and then says you're not eligible for help from us with your criminal issue. Then if they're assuming they get through that step, then they are routed to our queue, which is what looks like on the screen. And everything on there, there's a lot of data. You can set it up how you want. It's a lot of widgets, they say, and you can collect all kinds of data that you may need. The first column is really the live callers, and it shows me at a quick glance how many people we have in the various queues. And then in the column all the way to the right where it's got DQ time, those are people that have left a callback, meaning rather than sit there and wait until their paralegal gets to them, they're allowed to leave their phone number, it holds their spot in the queue, and they get routed to a paralegal when their time comes up. Inevitably, we still have people that are willing to hold, even if it's for hours, and if that's the case, then that spot will be blank, and I know that's a live caller. Let's see. The next slide is a little bit more details about our queue itself. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Got ahead.
If you actually click on one of the queues, like Law Line Queue, then you're going to get to this screen where it actually gives you phone numbers. And so that's why the arrow is there. The number at the top is actually a client had called in through our local office and got routed to our intake system through the local office. So it shows the local office number. So that's why that number is showing. But it's really helpful to have the phone numbers there because there are times where you're trying to reach a client, like a specific paralegal needs to reach a client. I can look in there and see if that client has called back, and then I can hang it up from the queue and tell the paralegal they just called, go ahead and give them a call back. And then it's more efficient than that client getting transferred to somebody else who has to play catch up. So once they get into the queue and the paralegal then starts the actual intake process of putting them into our case management system. And they start with an eligibility slip where they're screened for the legal issue, their income, assets, household information, all that sort of stuff. We use KIMPS as our case management system. We have done a lot of specializations for our fields and things like that for various projects over the years and stats that we like to track. So. But that's just a blank slide of a fake intake that I had made. And if they are eligible, then they get to the full intake process. And this is where they get transferred from an eligibility screen over to a full intake gets started. Now, in Virginia, one of the perks is that paralegals can give legal advice under the direct supervision of an attorney. And so our paralegals are allowed to do that. So what their next step is, once they've gone through the LSC eligibility and everybody is good to go, they have a set of Q&A that is in KIMPS that is grouped by LSC problem codes and then special problem codes. And so they can pull up housing questions, divorce questions, eviction questions versus security deposit issue questions. And all of that information is in the case management system, and that's where they start. And of course, it's, clients never have cut and dry issues, and they can have issues that bleed into one another. And they are able to go back and forth between the two different types of sets of questions as needed. So depending on the attorney availability in our local offices, the paralegal, we have a SharePoint document that is a live document. It is updated in real time that each office has responsibility for letting us know what cases they're able to take based on attorney availability and any other kind of things that might be going on in each local office. And so based on that document, some cases are transferred at that point. So a paralegal can finish the intake. They know it's going to get transferred for further representation by an attorney, so that case gets sent. But in some cases, as we all know, there's more need than we can always meet. So there are a lot of times where the client is going to get advice from our intake line instead, and hopefully be able to assist themselves. And so that's where it's really helpful that paralegals in Virginia can give this advice. And just like the Q&A, we have advice in our case management system that is grouped by LSC problem codes and special problem codes. And all of the advice is updated to current by myself. And so everything they are given is factually accurate, knock on wood. So one of the things we have is the ability to also follow up now with clients. So once they finish the intake, like I said, it's either transferred or it's closed at the law line level with the advice given. But then there are times where me and the supervising attorney, we review every case that is closed that day. We review every case that's open, but we definitely review every case that has been given advice that day. And sometimes there is an issue that was missed or a bit of factual advice that our advice doesn't quite fit. So me or the supervising attorney will let the paralegal know, you need to call this client back, or we need to follow up in some way. So now the good thing is our KIMPS has the ability, we can text clients. And so if it's just a little nugget of information that they may need, or even just, oh, I forgot to tell you, you should call the, Division of Motor Vehicles and make sure you get that license issue taken care of. So it's very helpful that now we can text clients through their case in KIMPS, and it's not revealing any personal information of that paralegal, which, sometimes when a client has personal direct access, then it's game on. And so the KIMPS system allows you to text through their case through a generic number, and we can do follow-up that way. Another thing that we have is a no-reply email for the same purposes. If there is some sort of follow-up that is needed, we can email that little bit of information and just make sure the client got the full information and help that they needed. We also have a no documents email that clients, if a client is calling us about something that really needs us to take a look at it, me or the supervising attorney we receive leases that way, we receive notices, all kinds of just documentation that we need to make sure we're giving accurate advice. And so we have a documents email that comes directly to us, and again, it depersonalizes the situation, so then the client doesn't use that as a way to bypass our intake system in the future. So the approach that we have had at this point is kind of to try and be a one-stop shop. That try to keep the caller on the phone. We try to minimize callbacks as much as possible, and we try to provide as much assistance at that time as we can, from the basic screening all the way to the advice, or transferring it to the local office for further assistance. So how did we get here?
I have a question before you go through that.
Sure.
You close the case with counsel advice?
Yes.
Does the paralegal do that, or does the attorney draft the letter, or does the attorney approve the letter before it goes, or go by email? How do you guys do it?
The paralegal gives all the advice and closes the case. We actually, just in the last probably 8 years or so, we went away from putting all of that advice into a letter, because it started to bog down the efficiency of it. And we found that our clients didn't read the letter if it was more than a page. So we actually stopped rehashing in our closing letters the advice. So what we do now is we have form letters that say, you called about this legal issue, this is you got advice, here are some brochures, call us back if you have more issues. Now, of course, there are instances where we will add a paragraph of something specific if needed, and that is reviewed by an attorney. But the paralegal closes the case, opens the case, closes the case from start to finish, and the two attorneys that are supervising, we review every case that is open that day to make sure all the proper advice was given, that the advice that was given was correct. And they included everything they need to be told.
The letter also states the case is closed.
Yes. Yeah, it says your case is closed. You can call us back if you need further assistance, and it includes a survey and a link to the survey on our website as well. Yeah, and it's that no reply email has been a godsend on that end too, because the paralegals can email that closing letter now and the survey instead of having to print it out, stamp it, and mail it. So, okay, so how did we get here? So we actually. The actual incarnation of our system started with one paralegal doing basic screening for one of our offices. And that paralegal is actually still one of our paralegals to this day. And that was over 2 decades ago. So then what we decided to do was it expanded at that point, and it was just a basic screening tool where every client would call, get screened for LSC eligibility. So legal issue and income. And then they were routed to the local office to be dealt with. And so at that point, it became increasingly evident that there were so many clients that were going to the local office that needed one question answered, or just some little bit of advice or something to help them help themselves. And so then we decided to expand the unit and start giving some advice in those cases. And the goal was it would free up the local office to take more extended representation cases rather than attorneys taking time to draft letters of advice and things like that. Most of that would be handled by Lawline. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. At the time we set up all of the Q&A and the advice in KEMPS, the entire advocacy staff, at the time actually that Lawline was created, I was a staff attorney, and I got tasked with drafting the Q&A and the advice for our wills section. And it was extremely time consuming. Anybody that's been in a room full of lawyers, we would then debate for hours over the order of the questions and what word made much more sense, and it was a complete nightmare. But we got it done, and if only AI had been a thing back when we were doing this, it would have saved all of us a lot of man hours, I think. So the changes since we really started in 2005, so at one point we did try to really streamline our online intake and our phone intake to do a lot of the screening for us before they even reached a paralegal. So it was asking online and on the phone, it was asking household income, how many people in the household. It was asking your location, your legal issue, assets, asking questions about your number of assets. And we all thought that was going to be such a real great time saver. And unfortunately, as you can see from the picture on the screen, that totally backfired on us. So what happened was we held some focus groups with potential clients and previous clients. And what we found out is when they called our phone system that asked maybe 5, 6, 7 questions, they were stopping at question 2. And they were getting frustrated by question 2 and either hanging up and calling back or pressing 0 to get somebody else. It was just, we just hadn't thought of it in that context. You're already frustrated. A lot of times they're already frustrated. And then they call, and then they're asked to answer all of these questions. And it really wasn't, we realized it wasn't working for our clientele. We also, the online intake information We had it set up where what a client put in the online app was getting fed right into our case management system. Sounds like a great idea. What we found was the paralegals would pick up the phone and have this information in front of them. But what they found was a lot of times, again, the household information wouldn't be accurate, or there would be it would just be misspellings and just different problems. And the paralegals came to us and said, it's just easier for us to start from scratch rather than they've already been asked all these questions once. Now we're asking them again because we have to verify the information they have, and we're having to correct anything and go in. It's just easier for us to just start from scratch, ask the questions, and put it in. And so we realized it wasn't lessening anybody's burden and making anything more efficient from our end, and was just a big bone of frustration for our clientele. And so that's why our current triage system is really narrowed down to just asking about location and asking about legal issue, and then they get on the train. Let's see. So the next thing is our callback feature. That was a huge improvement. I can't believe we practiced so many years with our intake system without this. That's the feature I talked about where you can enter your phone number and it holds your spot in the line. Before then, we would have clients that would literally wait for hours. There would be people still on hold when we closed for the day, and it really just wasn't, it was, again, just a source of frustration. So now the majority of them do leave their phone number. It works properly. They're happy when they get a call back. So having that callback feature is absolutely essential. Another good aspect of our current system is that RingCentral Engage can run just about any report that you want as far as wait times, agent statistics, just about how many calls came in, how long was an agent on the phone, how long were they off the phone, how long obviously did the client wait before they added the callback. So it's just basically anything you would want to know, you can find out. There's a question. Yeah. I believe it is cloud-based now. When we first started with them, it was not, but now it is cloud-based. Again, I talked about the no reply email, but not only is it helpful as far as a tool to follow up with the client to give them additional advice we may have missed, but it's also a good way when you can't reach a client. You would be amazed how many times we call a client, leave a voicemail, don't hear anything, but you shoot them an email or you shoot them a text and you get a call within 10 minutes. So the no reply email and the ability to text have been really helpful to us. And then again, the documents email where they can send documents directly to us for review is definitely. And then we talked about the text. So the wish list, I'll be honest with you, my wish list for 2024, had I written this slide prior to this or after this conference, it would be way different. I didn't even know what options there were out there until I sat through the sessions over the last couple of days. So certainly, I think AI would be extremely effective if we had some sort of chat assist on our website. We could also use the AI as a way to test and formulate our triage system at the beginning. It's even the way that our paralegals ask their eligibility questions. I do think that AI itself would just be, there are so many uses I think that we could probably use it for. I will say this too, I'm not, there are some glitches with our phone system, so I do have a separate wish list for them. But all in all, I think this system we've been using, other than the little kind of perks that we've added along the way, has been in place since 2005, which is actually, really old at this point. And so it could definitely use some revamps. But like I said, what they are, I was clueless before coming here, and now I've got a much better idea but the bones and the heart of it itself, I really do, I do think we have a good system. And, but, it's time for us to do another focus group with some clients and see what their suggestions might be at this point. So, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Leslie. So Nick, do you want to tell us a little bit about what Lone Star's doing?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Leslie. Name's Nick Whitaker. Again, I'm directing attorney for case management at Lone Star Legal Aid. Was previously the managing attorney for our centralized intake unit. We covered the Texas Gulf Coast and East Texas. And our centralized intake unit is set up very similarly to Virginia Legal Aid societies. We have managing attorney and a number of paralegals who do the actual hard work of answering the phones and completing the intakes in the case management system. However, our case management system is Legal Server. We adopted Legal Server in 2019 and significantly revamped our intake process at that time to utilize Legal Server's reporting capabilities. And so I'm sorry, some of the stuff I go in, if you don't use Legal Server, and some of the stuff I say about reports doesn't make sense, understand, but you may be able to model the general process. And so just as a general overview of our intake process at Lone Star, we have 3 portals: online intake, phone, and in-person intake. And like Leslie said, they all end up with just a conversation with intake staff in the end. And that information is entered into Legal Server through an intake process set up with forms. If you set up Legal Server, you know all about putting forms in the process using branch logic and guided navigation. Just to give you an idea of how centralized, CIU completed about 30,000 out of 48,000 intakes last year, so they're doing about 60% of the intakes for the organization. And when we revamped the intake process, we really focused on 3 things: trying to make it efficient, procedural, and scalable. And by efficiency, we're looking not just at how long it takes to complete the intake, but also how long it takes to get back to the client or applicant. It may not end up being a client, sadly. We all know limited resource issues. But no one wants to submit an application for an issue that's important to them and that they're anxious about, and they wait 3 months, and then they get a reject letter in the mail. And by procedural, mean that we wanted every case to follow the same defined steps in a process with as little external input as possible, so that we can know where an intake is and what the next step is just by looking at a report, and that we can keep those intakes moving along without having to necessarily wait for someone to make a manual review of it, or we don't have to open up and read a bunch of case notes to figure out when this is going to move on to the next step. And by scalable, I just mean being able to handle variable amounts of volume. We were also planning to launch our online intake shortly after we adopted Legal Server, and we had no idea how many applications we were going to get. And so we wanted to be able to handle whatever volume came through the virtual door. And the intake questions that are in I'm going to mostly focus on the intake process and any specific questions. I think we have a fairly unique process at Lone Star that really relies heavily on Legal Server reports to manage our intakes. But the questions that we do have in there are really intended just to get enough information for our managers and the offices that take cases to make acceptance decisions. We're not trying to figure out whether someone qualifies for every grant we possibly have. The intake is long enough without getting into all of that. Just a little chart here. In most of these arrows, there's a report that tells us where these cases are, and a report when it's going to get kicked to the next step. So for our online intake, hopefully you don't feel as frustrated as this gentleman here. We use Legal Server's online intake module with guided navigation. We get basic contact and case information. There are no open-ended questions. We have not put in a lot of eligibility questions or anything like that for the reasons. We talked to other legal aids, and for the reasons Leslie went over, we have not done that. And if we can't help with an issue, it's for instance, criminal defense issue, we will send the applicant to a page with resources to assist them. We also don't allow emergency cases that have legal deadlines within 2 days. Just with an online application, there's no guarantee we'd be able to get back to people before their court case came up. And so instead they get a page telling them, hey, you have a really urgent issue, please call us instead. And it gives them the information to their local office if there is one, or to our main line. And also, as part of volume control, we don't like to have to do this, but occasionally we have had to just say, for even law types that we would generally take, we can't do this on our online intake right now because we're just overwhelmed. The height of the pandemic, when there were so many evictions coming in, we were getting far more applications and we were able to call back, and it was just building up and up and up, and we had to take a look at what cases were not being taken. And at that time, there were almost universally no one had capacity to take divorces where custody and domestic violence were not issues. And so we just had to say, if people applied for a divorce and there wasn't a custody or domestic violence issue, you could call us and try to get an application that way. We're not just saying we don't do it carte blanche, but we just couldn't keep up with the volume of intakes otherwise. So we had to redirect them to our other intake portals. Once an applicant completes the online application, it gets imported into our case management system and is assigned to an intake supervisor, which are just paralegals that help supervise the process. They are not the ones necessarily calling anyone back, but we just assign it to them. It has to be assigned to someone, so it stays in their name. And actually, our staff call applicants back from a series of callback reports that triage the applications. So we'll have right now we have three online callback reports, and so staff open that. And the first one is cases with legal deadlines that are coming up. Second are urgent issues that may not have a deadline, such as evictions and cases involving domestic violence. And then there's one for everything else. And we do get to the cases with everything else. We just try to call the other ones with more urgent issues back first. And otherwise, we call them back in the order they're received. And to make sure staff aren't stepping on anyone's toes or calling people at the same time, the reports show when a note was last made in the case. That's off on the side, and staff make a note as soon as they open a case to call someone back. So when they're looking at the report, they start at the top, look to the side, and see, has this person been called back today, or are they being called back now? And if they are, they just move down the line until they get to the end of the report and move to the next one or call the next case. So for our phone intake, we also have, we use FortiVoice for our phone software, and if calls to the CIU are routed to a call queue, we can control the maximum number of people allowed on hold at any time, and that's to manage the wait time. So you can have, I think we usually allow about 15 people in the queue, but sometimes if 2/3 of your staff are out in the middle of December, and you don't want people waiting for 4 hours, we take that down to say 5 or so. And also we do have a couple language options. So there is a Spanish queue and a Vietnamese queue to go to people who speak those languages. Also, if call volume is high at any particular time, staff can do an incomplete application, which just gets enough information to see if you have a legal emergency and how we're going to get back in touch with you. And then they put that case on an incomplete application status. And we have a series of callback reports that are designed just like the online callback reports, except they, instead of showing cases from the online intake, they show cases that were from the phone intake but incomplete. And we have staff who go and call those incomplete intakes back. And so we'll tell them, hey, we can't finish your application now, but we'll call you back tomorrow or later today, and we'll get it done for you. And like RC Engage, FortiVoice provides all sorts of reports on call metrics, just how many people disconnected, how long the average call was, things like that. We also do in-person intake, but I won't talk too much about that. The centralized intake unit doesn't do it, and it's still really has not picked up since COVID. So it does exist, but it basically works the same as the phone intake, only there's no option to do an incomplete application, but you're just talking to the person, enter the information into the case management system. And for the units who do outreaches, they have a sheet that basically gets the same information as an incomplete intake, and then just manually enter it when they get back to the office, and we'll call that person back. Okay. So completing the intake, someone's called our queue and got picked up, or they made an online application, we call them back, staff ask all the questions, verify LSC eligibility, and then they enter what we've called a take-back date, which is to set the amount of time that we're going to let the case be reviewed by other offices for acceptance. And that's usually 7 days, though we will shorten that for emergency. So if you have a hearing in 2 days, we're not going to wait 7 days to review it. We'll try to review it in 24 hours, then have someone call you for advice if we can't take the case. Like with Virginia Legal Aid Society, Texas, our paralegals can give advice in Texas, and they do that from attorney-reviewed templates that are also reviewed by supervising attorneys in the intake unit. And those cases are also, they're immediately put on a ready to close status, and another paralegal will go through and close those cases and send out the letter. And if an applicant's found ineligible during the intake, they stop it as soon as reasonably possible, and we have a status for ready to be rejected, and the case is put on that status. So now the intake unit's done its job, and now it's up to the reviewing offices to try to take some cases. So each unit has reports that shows referrals from the centralized intake unit. So the cases are put on a referral status when they're completed, and then offices run their report, and it picks up any cases on those status. And the office can manage their reports and pick up whatever they want from there. They can filter by law type, county of residence. We have some units that focus on grants, and they don't care where people live. They just need to know, are you a veteran? And we have other offices that are geographically oriented, and they mostly want to know, where do you live? But they also may need to know, what's your age, to see if you qualify for grants for elderly individuals or anything else that may be going on. And it's very easy for them to accept a case. If they see a case, they can open it, read the intake notes, and if they want to accept it, they just update their assigned office and legal server, change it from the intake unit to their unit, and they assign it to one of the staff in their unit. And the intake unit will never see that case again. It is now that office's responsibility. Every day, or every business day, I should say, the CIU staff run a report showing intakes that have passed their take-back date, and we assume the units are not taking those cases, so those get assigned to intake attorneys for advice and counsel. We call them intake attorneys who are actually not doing intakes. They are calling people back to provide advice and counsel on the issue that they contacted us about. So the paralegals will provide kind of advice that they could issue spot, like SNAP, and the attorneys will deal with the substantive legal issue that they called in about. And we try to give everyone at least advice and counsel, though unfortunately we do not always have capacity to quite get to everybody. And then the intake unit is also charged with closing, ultimately closing everything that is not taken by an office, and that is a large number of cases. So we have a closing report and a reject report, and staff will go through those, and they will draft the letters, check for compliance if it was a closed case, and send those out. And then finally, we have a series of error reports that intake supervisors run. Since all of our reports are so heavily reliant on seeing what the case status is at any given time, and in Legal Serve, you also have case disposition and status. We have error reports to check for any sort of mismatched disposition and status, or if someone entered a take-back date that's not, in a different year or way more than 7 days out, just to catch these errors, because if the case goes on the wrong status and it doesn't show up on any one of our reports, no one's going to get to it. It's going to fall through the cracks, and we don't want that. So we have to run a series of reports just to catch everything else that might not, basically show all the case statuses that aren't covered by any of the other reports, and then find out, how did something end up on this status? Right. So some of the motivations behind that process, we're basically just trying to keep things moving. Some offices with the best of intentions would receive referrals from the intake unit in the past, and they would really want to take that case, but they lacked capacity, so they would hold on to the case and then see if maybe some capacity came up. And of course, more cases keep coming in during that time. They never stop, and that would just create a big backlog that was difficult to overcome. So we just kind of said, you have 7 days, you need to make that decision by then, and we need to let the applicant know. And if not, we're going to start trying to call them and give them advice, and you will get more cases in the future, we promise. And we don't, it's not a hard line. If someone sees a case on the 7th day and they forget to assign it to themselves, they can always take it from the intake attorney. We want people to get further service if they can, but we also don't want to leave clients just waiting around with nothing happening on their case. The motivation behind giving offices referral reports was to two things: avoid communication issues with the centralized intake unit, and to really free up a lot of staff time to do more intakes. Prior to doing that, offices would send us their criteria for what they wanted, and we would have to put that in a sheet for the paralegals to go through, and they would have to go through and see which every office that this might be eligible for and check off a multi-select box, and that's how it made it to those offices. And since everything was based on fields we already had in Legal Server, we thought, why not just let the computer do this? Those offices can say what they want to see out of the intake. That way they don't have to tell us and we don't have to regurgitate it. And they can update it as they need. Paralegals aren't spending a bunch of time going through checkboxes and doing something a computer can do much more accurately and much faster. And finally, the callback reports were designed so multiple staff could work on them at once without having to individually assign cases. It can be difficult to figure out how different people's workloads are going to be. And so that way you don't have to figure out, oh, this person can have 8 cases today, this person can have 9. They're just going to call people back as they can. And that way you also don't have to worry about if someone's there to check for their cases for takebacks for the day. Just anyone can pick up any case at any point to keep it moving along. So there are a couple issues that do arise in the process and some future considerations. And like Leslie, I wish I had written this slide after some of the sessions that we've seen. But reports in Legal Server do not update in real time, so staff have to make sure they refresh the page or rerun the report, or they are not going to see whether any of those intake notes got updated and may end up working on the same case. Once they open the case, they'll probably see someone's been working on it because information's been filled out. But every now and then you get people opening the same case at the same time, just happen to stumble across it and try and call at the same time. Also, the way our referral reports work mean to the offices that take cases, is that it's a first come, first served basis. So whoever grabs the case first, if it's being referred to multiple offices, that office gets it. So if you have grant deliverables you need to watch out for, you need the managing attorneys of different offices need to communicate with each other to make sure they're not taking, one office doesn't take a case that another office needs for its deliverables. And just, we've considered adding eligibility questions. I think I went over that, but we did not because it's can be very hard to get accurate information and everything kind of has to be confirmed anyway, so it doesn't, we want to see what eligibility we can without running into that issue. We haven't really been able to figure out how to do that with getting it accurately and not having to go over everything twice. We also like to take a little look at our phone system and implement some of the features that Virginia Legal Aid Society has, such as having some triage questions at the beginning, not too many, but enough to help out, and also a callback feature sounds amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. All right, last but not least, Sally.
Okay, hi everybody. Does anybody need chocolate thrown at them before I start? Okay, here we go. Oh man. All right. I'm sorry. Everybody duck. Oh no. Okay. Whoop. And all right. There you go. All right. Okay, sorry. You can see why my softball career did not go past 7th grade. So we are, I'm at Atlanta Legal Aid, and sorry, did you guys get your chocolate? There's always come up afterwards if you need anything. We have plenty up here. We're in a different place than both Lone Star and Virginia in that we are kind of just starting our process. Obviously, we have intake, but right now we have we work in 5 counties. We have 6 locations. And we are decentralized intake. So obviously we are working towards centralizing intake. And in 2021, we got a TIG to pilot. Yes. Can you define intake? Oh, okay. So, well, I mean, I would think like we usually refer to like screening as eligibility screening, and then the intake would be a full, like somebody's eligible. Now we're doing like asking them all the questions about their and deciding whether we're going to take the case, et cetera. It depends. For us, it depends on what office we're in. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I think our goal is to lean more towards what they're doing, and that it would include legal advice if it's not a priority case that we're going to take. Then those people would be given brief advice, and their case would be closed. So that's what we're leaning to. We're not there yet. So we have just started piloting this. We started in 2022 piloting this with our family law unit, our online intakes for family law. And our goal is now to launch for the entire program in 2024, centralizing intake. So, and the way we started our process was we engaged a really great consultant. I mean, really amazing. Her name is Laura. You guys might have seen her, to do a business process analysis of all of our, every office's intake, where we could find some commonalities, what our problems were, what were our strengths, etc. So, we, through that business process analysis, which, Laura could talk more about that, but, she sat with every intake worker in all of our offices. She talked to managers. She really learned about Atlanta Legal Aid and about all of the different counties, and how they operate. And, she identified a lot of issues, and a lot of them are not technology issues. They're, training, their personnel, their policy issues. But we did identify some places where we could implement tech solutions, whether we were in centralized intake or not yet there, that would make this process more streamlined and to make it, make it so that it is fair to any applicant that is coming in is getting a similar experience when they're talking to any one of our intake or screening workers. So, some of the problems that we identified was during what I'm going to call the eligibility screening. So that very first, phone call, is that all of our different offices, we use Legal Server. So nobody was using Legal Server to do that initial contact. They were using Google Sheets. And then once they did an eligibility screening, they would either put it into Legal Server or not, because that's just kind of how it was already done. It was always done. And of course, some of our offices were, phone calls were coming in. Our applicants would leave a message, and then we couldn't get a hold of them. I mean, as I'm sure everyone in here has experienced, it is so hard to reach clients by phone. So when that is our first contact is trying to call clients, it is a huge problem, and it takes up so much time, and it really is frustrating for everyone. So, so that first, I'm going to call that our eligibility screening. So our full intake, once somebody is deemed to be eligible, the process has been inconsistent. Applicants get a different experience depending on which office they're calling, which person they talk to. And so we really, we wanted to find a way to make that more consistent. I think, probably like a lot of you in here, we receive so many more calls than we can, ever manage. And just doing applicant screening and intake is taking up time that could go to actually representing clients. So, and we really wanted to find a way that we could engage volunteers in our intake process. So with online intake, we do online intake also through Legal Server with guided navigation. Again, callbacks, the follow-up phone calls, we found that 30 to 40% of people did not answer. We never got a hold of them. Staff who were processing the online intakes were finding that people, because we have all these different offices and ways to get a hold of us, nobody could get, there were so many duplicative efforts. And so sometimes an office had already talked to somebody who had also applied online, and we weren't tracking that. And there was just no easy way. We needed to find an easy way to kind of, when we were being overwhelmed, when our office didn't have capacity to take intakes, how do we stem the tide? Because I'm sure, like many of you, it can be overwhelming. Our staff are overwhelmed by online intake because there's just not a great way to shut it down. So what we came up with, we wanted to identify some tech solutions. We don't know exactly how our centralized intake is going to look. We've been doing a ton of phone calls. That's how I discovered, it's interesting. I'm kind of like a lemming in that I get on the phone with, I don't know if that's I get on the phone with, Virginia and hear their process, and I'm like, that's what we should do. And then I get on the phone with Lone Star. I'm like, that's what we should do. Everybody's doing something very different and interesting. And so what we wanted to do, depending on, we wanted to create something that was within Legal Server, so that everything was within Legal Server, and also that we created a foundation of these kind of these technologies or these processes that we could use no matter what our ultimate what our ultimate centralized intake unit is going to look like. So we wanted something that would just be this foundation. We can tweak it as we move on, but we wanted to put something in place that would give us a good foundation. So for our problems in that first eligibility screening, what we're using the pre-screen process in Legal Server. So Laura created a custom process where we are only, just for that consistency, we're only asking those a couple questions to determine eligibility. That's it. And from that process, from that form, you can also, staff can text. So say it's somebody left a message, they can text the client saying, hey, we got your message. Someone from this number will call you. They can also send appointments and say, hey, here are some appointments for your screening or for your full intake. Go ahead and schedule yourself into an appointment. And you can do that from the pre-screen process. Everything goes into a callbacks list. That we also, Laura also, I'm like, Laura did it, you guys. None of this was me. That where we use the callback process as well, where we can track how many times somebody has been called, just so that, again, multiple people can touch a case, or before, multiple people can work on calling someone back on those initial eligibility intake process, depending on who's in that day, right? Anybody can see who is in the queue and how many times they've been called, and they can reject a case from there if they've been called too many times and haven't gotten a hold of them. We also created talked to our staff and asked, what would you like to see in this callbacks list? And created custom reports that had that information that they would want to see to kind of determine who to call first. They can also filter the reports. And so we have kind of custom callback lists. So that's something that we have rolled out. It's been, I think, very useful for units, especially when something comes into them. It's not for them. They want to refer it to another unit, and they can do that very easily. If somebody calls in, you can immediately see if if they've already called and talked to another office, because it's in the pre-screen. There is a report in Legal Server. It's not on a Google Sheet on somebody's, personal drive. So, the second thing that we did to kind of alleviate our inconsistencies in intake is that we created guided navigation. We created interviews. This was for our family law. We did 4 or 5 different, depending on the problem, the legal problem that the client called with. And these, we created questions, with our family law attorneys. Basically, what would you want to know if a case was referred out to you, whether or not this is a priority case or not? So that's our idea, is we want to identify whether it's a priority case. And if it's not a priority case, we want there to be a set of self-help advice and resources already in the guided navigation. And the idea, the hope, we've used it a little bit. We haven't, I won't say that this is fully tested, but is that volunteers could use it. So we have had law students use this guided navigation with success. We've had other volunteers, mostly long-term volunteers. So these are not like one time somebody calls and is doing a full applicant intake, but that is our hope, is that we can plug volunteers into this process. So, the idea, of course, we want to, now we've used this as a pilot, we want to move this out to all of our case, every case that we handle. So, what we have found, though, is that we made it way overly complicated. I think that everybody, you want to ask every single question you have, and you want to get all the information, and everybody, of course, wants every single piece of information they can from a client. But we found is that it is exhausting for the client, and it is not as helpful as you think, because people are having to re-ask those questions if they do decide to take the case. So what we are doing now is revising those interviews and really simplifying them and getting it down to here are the questions we need. Here are the 5 questions, and that's it. Yes.
How do you balance that with funder required debt reporting? Are you changing where you're collecting the data?
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's where we're collecting the data. And I think that we're still collecting a lot of demographic data and that kind of stuff. So that's an intake, but yeah, I think it just depends on, we don't want to ask, especially for, say, family law clients, a lot of, we just don't want to ask those really sensitive questions over and over about their case details, and only for it to go out to a county office for them to ask those same things. So the next, we are piloting this. We worked with LegalServer to make some changes to their platform that would work for us. The way that we see this working is, and that we've used in some ways, it's not rolled out across the program, is to use appointment setting. So to kind of alleviate our, of course, the callbacks issue is that we can send a client appointments, a list of appointments, and they can schedule themselves. Also, or if somebody's on the phone with them during that initial eligibility screening, you're eligible, great. Let's go ahead and schedule you into an appointment right now. And they can do that in LegalServer in their case file, and assign that to an attorney or to a paralegal, whoever's going to do that intake. So that has worked really great for the units we have tested it in. We haven't rolled it out across the board because, of course, it's hard to get people to adopt new things. And then in our, kind of along with this, and this is very new testing, piloting phase, is using enhanced reminders. And this is, for any of you who are in LegalServer, you probably heard of workflows, which is a way to kind of automate a lot of things, a lot of processes. And so what we have worked with LegalServer is to automate reminders once a appointment is set and the client has checked, yes, I consent to text, then they will get automatic appointment reminders at a day before, 30 minutes before, and they can also get a form sent to them that will allow them to cancel or reschedule their appointment. And so that's all will be automated, but that is brand new. I think the changes just came it came in yesterday. So, but just know if you use LegalServer and you're excited about that, that is a possibility. And thank you to TIG for that money. So, and then our last, issue is online intake. I think that is, probably something that, we will revisit in the future as, we're collecting a lot of information that is probably, unnecessary. But, one of our big problems, of course, is stemming the tide of online intakes. What we have done right now is we will turn it manually on and off sometimes. And doesn't create a great user experience, right? So it doesn't create a great expectation for clients of when can I be here? So what we have are piloting is online intake. People can use on online intake, they can schedule themselves into screening appointments. So they can choose that. And if there are no screening appointments available, online intake can be closed and there will be a notification of that. So they will be, say, hey, call the office. But that also will allow our offices and eventually our centralized intake unit to say, this is the time we have to respond to these calls. And so, have them scheduled in. We also have this is just kind of getting into the weeds of LegalServer, but another thing is that you can say, I have a block of time and I want, I want 5 people can come in that block of time. And of course, you don't know how every phone call is not going to be 30 minutes. So you're not going to schedule them every 30 minutes. You just schedule 5 people within that block of time. And then you just get through that list. So they know, it's like a handyman coming to your house. So we'll call you between 1 and 4 on Thursday. So that's another thing that that's another thing for online intake that we have, or for appointments. And then the last thing is that, and this is something that we have rolled out, is that one of our issues was that we had separate callback lists for online intake and for our phones. And that was really hard. It is really hard for our intake workers to manage both lists and to figure out who gets called when. And so Laura created a process in Legal Server, it's a process online intake. Basically, it mirrors a pre-screen process with all the things, same things. You can text appointments. You can text the client saying, "We got your application," and then. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, you guys. and then it's all in the same list. So as our phone intake. So okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Sally. Can I just have the mic?
Yes.
All right. We are just about at time. We haven't had a chance to get to questions, so we will take a look at the app and respond to questions on the app. Just a few things that are in the slide deck that will be uploaded are around some best practices. So many of you may be here because you may be thinking about looking into redesigning your intake process. A couple of quick best practices are going to be included in the slide deck that I'll just hit on in a minute or less. Collecting feedback on what is and isn't working from a diverse group of staff. So going into an intake design, please make sure you're talking to a diverse set of staff, not just taking input from, say, managers. Make sure frontline staff are in there. Make sure clients are included in there. You want to make sure you have representatives from different programs, different offices, rural versus urban, but make sure you're getting a wide range of feedback going into an intake redesign consideration. You want to make sure you're shadowing. So what people tell you and what they're actually doing may be two different things. So you want to understand, you want to go and just watch them do what they're doing day to day. Make sure, is there standard policy or guidance? Are staff aware of it? Are they following it? And look at how intake processes or how intake experience differs office to office, program to program, person to person. As Sally was saying with Atlanta Legal Aid, we were noticing that the intake experience could be vastly different depending on what the office was, what the program was, who the person was. And you want to try to find some standardization there. You want to try to limit and standardize technologies intake staff are using. We heard about a wide range of different options that are out there. You want to sort of pick one or two and kind of stick with it. It's going to be easier to train on rather than people using a wide range. As Atlanta Legal Aid did, consider pilot projects. That's going to give you some successes hopefully early on, and you can share those lessons learned and roll them out to other programs. Intake can't ask it all. I think almost everybody touched on this, so I won't really belabor the point, but your intake workers can't ask everything. Get your eligibility information, get what you need to, decide, are we going any further with this case or are we just providing resources? But intake, you're going to have to streamline those questions. As Sally mentioned, oftentimes people want very complex question patterns, which sounds great on its face. We get a lot of information up front, but in reality, it just doesn't operationalize well. Use iterative design. So you want to design, you want to build, you want to test and collect feedback and refine and repeat. Don't get into the infinite loop though. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. It can be very easy to just never end this process. So at some point you have to kind of roll it out, let it out in the real world and see how it goes. And then you can go back to it. You want written policies and procedures, reinforce them through trainings and shadowings, and make sure that you have that continuous feedback loop. Keep collecting feedback as you go along. So that's some best practices in 3 minutes or less. Sorry for the rush at the end, folks. But please come up and ask any questions you have.